Hi, how are you, family? Welcome back to the channel and to this episode of Tell Me Rindo, where I'm gonna tell you a bit about my own, thoughts about tier lists, right? And how we can say or we can see or take a look at both the pros and cons of it and how it's gonna be affecting or how it would affect rather a community and such, right? Now, let's start by giving a short definition or a quick definition according to this source. And I quote, popularized by gamers, a tier list is a visualization of someone's subjective ranking of members of a related group. So, tier list essentially is this graph, a chart, a table of sorts, graph in a way, where they have these categories, right, with the most favored subject of the list, right, is placed on the upper end while the least favored is in the lower end, and it kind of depends as well on the topic at hand or the sort of subject of the list, right? You could say least healthy to most unhealthy or whatnot, so or most healthy, right? And it's usually represented through these letters, with S typically being used as to represent the highest of the high, A tier for high but not that high, and then you have B, C, and so on and so forth, with F tier usually being the last, right? And D at times. It really depends again on the list. Now, these tier lists are used to give the highlight of this is that it gives a subjective thought or personal ranking on what the person thinks this subject or the subject would be placed at on the tier, right? So this, for example, a pizza tier on the most delicious pizza branches, right? So you could have a bunch of these brands or restaurants rather, and create a tier list on what you would think, personally, you would think has the best pizza, and so on and so forth, right? Now, like everywhere else, family, right? When you would post a opinion or personal thought, right? You're always bound to find somebody who would disagree with you, right? And that is completely normal. It's human, right? It's human to have different thoughts and opinions about different things. And I think that's what really makes us, unique, right? It's that individuality or that thought process of having to know that you agree with something and you do not agree with something, right? And it also really depends as well because people have different cultures and different perceptions as to what they consider as normal, perhaps, or what they consider to be good or bad, right? And especially in the Hyakuno community, the 100 girlfriends who really, 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 really love the community family. I've even mentioned this in the tier lists that I've made before in my channel, where I talk about the characters of this manga, the girlfriends, right? Well, I tell you one thing: making a tier list, I suppose, or creating a personal tier list about the girlfriends on this manga is like walking on shards of broken beer glass, where it hurts, in a way, if to see your personal tastes being attacked, so to speak, right? Or it hurts to see people starting arguments, and that's what I, really don't like, where when someone posts a tier list, sorts of argumentative behavior or toxic behavior would spawn, and in my opinion is one of the worst parts of having a personal tier list and such, right? And this goes to show that this also happens to a lot of fandoms, to a lot of communities as well, especially where as a collective group they would all consider this particular thing to be all good, right? And it's like having a opinion about something that is other than the norm or other than the majority would get you, attacked, so to speak, right? In a way, right? Or negatively responded, right, by the majority. And yeah, that thing really sucks, right? And I believe, family, that there is, of course, a healthy way to debate and construct and approach really tier lists, right, in general, because I believe that tier lists is an incredible, tool, right, for us to, well, I'll share about it later, right? Now, cons first of having a tier list. For one, they evoke heated arguments, needless to say, right? Especially if they do not have any proper, argument or stance or evidence to back their claim up, which is incredibly important, family, because I believe that if you want to present an argument, at least you would have a reasoning or the proof to back up your claim, right? As a lot of things should, right? I suppose. You second of all, it will also ruin the perception of the subject, right? Placed on a tier, especially if it's lower. So, for instance, this is just an example, right? So let's say you're talking about fast food tier list, right? And you would have, let's say, McDonald's as placed in the C tier, right? Then, although it's just personal, you would also make other people who would look at the tier list consider, oh, okay, so if this person thinks that this fast food item is, C tier, right? Then, well, maybe I should eat there less, so to speak. Again, it really depends on how people would react. You can take it from with a grain of salt, right? After all, these are just opinions, but also consider the effect or the impact of these statements, right? Especially if they are coming from reputable sources, credible sources for that matter, or food critics and the like, right? Of course, people as soon as people read these critiques, they would have a change of mind, or they would think about it even more so, right? And that sort of aspect, if you try to include that into a into someone who's just a normal guy posting his or her opinions on the internet, then you can take it for a grain of salt. You can agree with it or you can disagree with it. Simple as that, right? And of course, you can also ruin friendships and the like, which it really sucks. The pros of this, however, is to guide people as to know what is good and bad. As I've said with the food critic example, right? With a guide that is good to bad, people can understand people can make careful decisions better, right? So there's that. It can also provide feedback, right, to upgrade what is wrong. And yeah, I think that's essentially one of the few pros that I've come up with at this moment, right? But how I personally would use a tier list is by simply adding objectivity, right? It's to find the goal is to find something that has clearly distinguishable features with one another, and use that as a basis, right? So for instance, if I were to create a tier list on who's most likely, or the character to most likely get passed out on the grass after a night of partying, right? I would put Momoha in A tier or S tier for that matter, I guess, and I don't know, Shizuka or Nano in F tier, right? Because they are the least likely to get passed out after a night of partying. Again, if there's something wrong with the way that I'm assessing things, you can feel free to correct me, right? And I'll correct also the list that I've made. And it's these sorts of lists or these topics of conversation that adds and builds more interest to the characters, right? Because for instance, we've never seen these characters, let's say for example, party all night, right? And we do not know for sure if they really do pass out. So these tier lists act as a sort of agent for us to think about what the character would do, right? Because it allows us also to exercise as to how well we know the characters, right? How well do we know that these characters would fit into this category? How well do we know that these characters would do this and that? And I don't know, some would find it creepy in a way, I guess, to be that invested. But I would say that, hey, that is just good observation, right? If you know the character, if you have good analysis of a character and what they can do, I think that can really be applied to other fields in life as well, right? Yeah, and that's really important, right? To understand and know someone, right? Now, I also wanted to address this as well about the tier list videos that I've made in the past, and one of which, I've also made one video that helps me back up my point, and it was a video about how I really love all of the girlfriends, all of the characters in this manga, right? Like purely, genuinely love all of them. They have so many quirks that just make them so likable and lovable, and I genuinely become invested into each one of these characters. Like they're so cute, lovable, and just everything about them that I love, right? But me personally, right, one of my favorite characters as well would be Momoha, because personally speaking, I've connected with her character. I really love her character at a personal and emotional level as well, and I do think her character design in turn is really cute. Simple as that, right? But that doesn't mean that I hate the other girlfriends. No, in fact, I love all of the other the girlfriends and characters of this manga, right? Now, going back, the tier list videos that I've made before, I've indeed included all of them as S tier or God tier for that matter, right? And in the tier list that I've made, I've also added a quick segment or quick tier ranking, right? That is based on reality or reality wise, right? On how the relationships would work realistically speaking. And of course, there will be some characters that will be placed in different categories. But never forget this, family, that this is fiction. At the end of the day, this is fiction, right? Even one so with supernatural elements, right? And looking at it realistically, right, is off the window, right? Why would you ever do that? But I made a tier list anyway because I am curious to find out on how that would play out. I'm curious to find out how realistically the Renter family is in the real world, right? And that's just my own curiosity or my own Pandora's box opening up, right? It's to know these answers and to figure out how things would work out, right? And of course, I know for a fact that in the manga, in this fictional story, everything would work out fine because it is what it is, right? That's just how this story would go. Rentaro is dating a right now 25 girlfriends, right? He's dating his cousin, a lot of eccentric people, a grandma, mom, and whatnot. And well, it is what it is. It is what it is, right, family? Now, here's a little a side Tell Me Rindo topic, right, suggested by one of the community members, and I thank you for that. It's on quote unquote how possible would it be to actually date 100 girls in real life, right? And short answer, in my opinion, I guess it's kind of possible with certain factors that can be achieved, right? One of which is the culture, right? For example, there are many cultures with polygamy marriages and the like, right? Another factor would be to consider the partners, the wives, for instance. In an example, the wives, to see how committed they are to the marriage, right? Or are they doing this just for love, out of love, or out of convenience or whatnot? It really depends, right? And you have to also consider as well the single male or female partner in the relationship, right? Where does this person have the resources, the commitment, and the strive and desire to really make all of the partners happy or not? Again, it really depends on the culture, right? But I don't believe there's actually been a record. I know there are couples with single male and two female wives, right? But yeah, for 100, I don't know. Perhaps so, if only if everything works out great. But other than that, I think it's really gonna take a long time still for that to happen. I don't know. It's just my opinion, right? Now, going back to tier lists, family. Whether it's personal or objectively driven, right? Just do what you want, right? There's a lot of tier lists that are harmful, right? And I think the toxicity would only happen once someone makes the first move into calling out your tier list or making a negative comment for that matter, right? Unless, of course, if it's critically constructed, right? Or it's there's a valid point to it, right? Which of course they can do, right? People, I believe, if you post something online, people can have the freedom, or if you choose to have the comment section enabled, people can be free to comment what they like, right? Share their thoughts. It's free speech, and that's good. And what you can do about it for any negative comment is to accept it, right? I suppose. And going back, if you believe that the opposing party would have a valid argument to your tier list, then feel free to think about it or to just ponder about it, right? And yeah, but at the end of the day, if you truly believe in your stance, in the stance of your tier list, then stick by it, right? Or unless if you're the type of person to get offended by everything so easily, then in my humble opinion, maybe just don't post a tier list at all, right? That's one thing to consider, and just enjoy everything as it is, right? But yeah, the key is about not engaging, right? Be the bigger man and not engage by responding in turn negatively to all these negative comments, right? We must break the cycle of hate and just create a community of love, care, and healthiness, right? And yeah, objective tier lists, it's the much safer choice in a way, right? I guess it's much more safer than having it personally, right? Especially in the Hyakuno community, where this is a story, the manga, where heroines are not left behind, where all girls are best girls. So when we take a look at things, let's take a look at it with more open-mindedness and more, concern, or more, oh yeah, transparency. Yeah, more transparency as to how other people might respond, right? So yeah, that's just my whole thoughts about it and this whole agenda. Oh wow, look at the time, it's already about 15 minutes already. But yeah, family, feel if you have anything else to add or comment, or yeah, add about what I'm discussing, feel free to share so in the comments below, because yeah, I'm always open to learn more and to to see different points of view from different people, right? Going back to the, I was about to add this. Going back to the whole Momoha partying, passed out, the tier list, right? Would you call it a tier list? Um, Although in the definition that I've read before, it says personally. Could you put things objectively? And if you do so objectively, would it still count as a tier list? Maybe it's a graph, right? But yeah, I don't know, family. This is just wild, and I think there's a whole lot more to learn, especially considering how people, especially newer people of this generation, I suppose, would have a much more, unique, I suppose, or really, forward thinking process that really opens up for new ideas to venture off into, more, you know, I guess, experiments or thoughts to create. Yeah, I think that's about it, family. Thank you for listening and take care.